Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was the creator of transcendental meditation. In 1967, his worldwide fame increased greatly when he became the spiritual advisor to the Beatles. However, he was already well known to many young people throughout the UK, and he had already made numerous public appearances throughout Britain. After the Beatles endorsed him, his increased fame would lead him to start on the cover of Life magazine, Newsweek and Time magazine, and he would also appear on both The Tonight Show and the Today TV show in America. He first met the Beatles in London in August 1967 after George and Patty Harrison urged the other Beatles and their partners to go with them to attend a lecture of Maharishi's in London. Not long after this, the Beatles went to Wales with Maharishi to begin studying meditation before eventually deciding to go to visit Maharishi's ashram in Rishikesh, India in February 1968. However, on June 15, 1968 in London, the Beatles formally renounced their association with Maharishi as a public mistake. So what went wrong? Welcome back to the White Album in Depth, and this is episode 22, Sexy Sadie. So as I've just mentioned in the intro, in spring 1968 the Beatles went to Rishikesh in India to study meditation with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Now Ringo would only last 10 days in India. After 10 days he went back to England because basically he couldn't manage with the food because of a health condition he had. It meant he could only eat beans and stuff like that. So he couldn't really live in the way they were having to live in India with very basic foods which Ringo couldn't eat. Anyway, Paul lasted a bit longer than that. He would last about 5 weeks before heading back to London. I can't remember why he went back. I think it was, I should have checked this really, I think it was Jay and Asher had something to get back to London for, so Paul just decided that was it, he'd had enough, it was time for him to go too. So after Paul left the ashram, Lennon's friend Magic Alex would then fly across to join John and George for the remainder of their time in India. Now Magic Alex had previously been seen as Lennon's guru. Lennon kind of was under his influence. However, when Alex got to the ashram, he was very alarmed to find that his influence over Lennon was sort of waning a bit. It wasn't as influential as he used to be. The Maharishi had kind of replaced him, and Alex was alarmed by this to see how much influence the Maharishi now had over John. So Alex decided he needed to do something about this. So Magic Alex now began trying to get Lennon back under his influence, and to do this he would begin spreading quite a nasty rumour around the ashram. So Alex would begin spreading a rumour amongst the students in the ashram, and this was a rumour that didn't really have any basis of evidence. He kind of just made it up, we think. But what it was he went around telling people that the Maharishi had made a sexual advance towards one of the female students on the course. We think it's most likely Maya Farah that this alleged advance took place. So when John Lennon found out about this allegation, this alleged allegation I should say, he was very much disgusted by this. He was furious with the Maharishi, and he decided the time had come for them to leave India. Now John had actually been wanting to leave India for a little while by this point, and he now finally had his excuse, he had his reason to go. But he didn't want anyone associated with this man anymore, so he demanded that George Harrison also left with him at the same time, which he did. So whilst John was packing his bag, the Maharishi actually came in, and he was confused about what was going on. He didn't understand what had suddenly happened, why John was suddenly so angry and leaving. And he was asking John, what's up, what are you leaving for, what's happened? And apparently John responded with saying words to the effect of, well, if you're so cosmic you'll know why we're leaving. So whilst packing his bag, John would start writing a new song. This would be a song inspired by what he'd just learnt, his anger, his frustration with the Maharishi. This would obviously also be the final song he would write in India. And it's a song we're talking about today. It's where its origins lie. It's Sexy Sadie. So during the taxi ride from Rishikesh back to Delhi airport, John would start singing to George this new song he'd just wrote. And at this point the song was called Maharishi, and the opening lyrics were, Maharishi, what have you done? You've made a fool of everyone. Now when John was singing this to George, George said to him, you can't sing that, it's not right, it's disgusting really, because at the end of the day George did not believe these allegations. He didn't really understand what was going on. So he said to John, you can't sing that, and he suggested changing it to Sexy Sadie. So that they knew what it was about, but you know, they wouldn't be potentially attacking an innocent man here. Anyway, John reluctantly agreed to change it to Sexy Sadie, although in later years he would say that he regretted doing this and he wished that he'd kept it as Maharishi. So the opening line of the song would also draw inspiration from Smokey Robinson's song I've Been Good to You, which was a personal favourite of John Lennon's.
Look what you've done.
Now in later years, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Cynthia Lennon have all disputed this claim. They've all said that they don't believe that the Maharishi actually did anything. And Paul has also said that he thinks part of the problem was John seeing the Maharishi as this sort of godlike figure. He didn't really see him as a normal man, and the idea of him doing something sexual with someone kind of disgusted him because he thought gods were above that and the Maharishi shouldn't be doing things like that. It was kind of a reality check for John that this is also just some normal bloke. Anyway, like I say, Paul, George and Cynthia, they all dispute this. They all think it didn't happen. They all think it was just Magic Alex making it up to try and get Lennon out of India and out of the Maharishi's influence in an inner circle. However, Maya Farah has actually stood by in later years the idea that she was assaulted by the Maharishi. She said that she can remember distinctly the Maharishi sexually harassing her, and she can remember 2 surprisingly male hairy hands going around her. So yeah, maybe Alex didn't make it up. Maybe it did happen. We don't know for certain, unfortunately. Anyway, eventually the Beatles would regroup at George's house in Esher during the last week of May in 1968 to record 27 acoustic demos. The vast amount of these demos would be songs that would end up on the White Album, and one of the demos recorded that day was Sexy Sadie. Now at this point the song is lacking its distinctive piano that would be in the finished thing, but it still works quite well as an acoustic song. John's got more or less all the words at this point, although he's singing Sexy Sadie. Unfortunately there are no recordings out there of him singing the original lyrics Maharishi. So yeah, we've been robbed of that, I'm afraid. But this demo, it's still quite good, it's quite interesting. It's still kind of got that character assassination charm of it. You can tell John isn't very happy when he's singing this song, this demo. Anyway, if you want to hear it, well, you can. It's on the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album, along with all the other demos that were recorded that day. The Beatles would begin work on Sexy Sadie on July 19th, 1968 at Abbey Road, or EMI Studios as it was known then. Now, to begin with, they would just rehearse the track. They needed to try and figure out how it went, because at this stage they didn't really know how the melody was to go. They didn't really know what style to play it in. However, they would eventually start actually recording proper takes on this day. So yeah, they did make a start on the basic track on this day's session. So for this session, John Lennon played acoustic guitar while singing his lead vocals, Paul McCartney played the organ, George Harrison played electric guitar, and Ringo Starr played the drums. Now at one point during this session, John would actually sing to Paul some crude versions of the lyrics, kind of similar to some of the original lyrics that he'd wrote before he changed them. They went a little bit like this. I'll quote it to you now. I will pre-warn you, the language is quite strong here, so apologies, but it goes a little like this. Sexy Sadie, you little twat, who the fuck do you think you are? Who the fuck do you think you are? Oh, you cunt. So yeah, obviously they would never actually record those lyrics properly, you know, it was never a serious thing. Although I think if John had his own way, they would have gone down that path. But yeah, I don't think the other 3 would have allowed it, basically, especially when Paul and George didn't actually believe the Maharishi had done anything wrong. Now this day's session at Abbey Road was actually quite a tense one. At one point the microphones would pick up George Harrison having a frosty exchange with producer George Martin. Yoko was also present at the session, and at one point she would suggest that the Beatles can do it a lot better than what they're doing. Now this input from Yoko would kind of understandably annoy Paul, George and Ringo. They weren't best pleased that this outsider was telling them how to do it. Now John obviously could pick up that the other 3 weren't best pleased about this input from Yoko, so he would try and diffuse the situation by just saying, well, I think I can play it better. So he would kind of be suggesting that you 3 are doing fine, it's me that's the problem. Very diplomatic of John, it's not really like him as well. Anyway, the band would manage to record 21 takes of the basic track this day. However, they weren't satisfied with any of them, so none of these would be used going forward. However, some of these have been subsequently released. Take 3, you can hear that on the 50th anniversary edition of the White Album, and Take 6 can be heard on Anthology 3. I actually quite like Take 6, I think it's quite an interesting take. Yeah, but Take 3 is nothing special, I don't think, but Take 6 is quite cool. So the next session for Sexy Sadie took place on July 24th, 1968, and the Beatles were hoping that this time they would be able to nail down the basic track after failing to do so on the first session for the song. They would record 23 further takes of the basic track this day before deciding that the last one that they recorded was the best one. However, despite this, John Lennon still wasn't satisfied. He didn't think that the performance or the arrangement of the song was very good, so he decided that nothing would be used once again from this day's session, and nothing has ever been released from this day's session. We haven't heard anything ever from this day, so yeah, waste of time really in the grand scheme of things. The third session for Sexy Sadie would take place on August 13th, 1968, and once again the Beatles would be focusing on getting the basic track nailed down. Now they were getting a bit fed up by this point. It's the third day that they've worked on this, the third session, and they haven't really gotten anywhere with it up until this point. Anyway, they would record a further 8 takes of the basic track, although unusually they actually labelled these takes 100 to 107. No idea why. So for this day's session, John Lennon played guitar and sang his lead vocals, Paul McCartney played piano, George Harrison played guitar, and Ringo Starr played drums. And at last, they finally managed to nail the basic track to a standard that they were happy with. They decided that take 107 was the best one, and they would begin adding overdubs to it. However, this would be done on a different day's session. No overdubs would be worked on for this day's session, because the band had had enough for the song. They wanted to go and do something else. So they'd spend the rest of this day's session locked in a cupboard, recording Your Blues. Go and watch my video on Your Blues if you want to hear all about that. It's very cool. So the fourth and final session for Sexy Sadie would take place on August 21st, 1968, just after George had returned home from his holiday to Greece. Now they would finally begin working on the overdubs for take 107 on this day's session. Firstly, John Lennon recorded a second lead vocal in order to double track his lead vocals on the finished version. Paul McCartney would also overdub some organ onto the song, and Ringo Starr would overdub some tambourine. So next, John, Paul and George recorded the backing vocals for the track, and then finally Paul would overdub some bass guitar onto the song, and then that was it. It was finished, it was good to go. They'd finally completed work on it. The White Album was released on the 22nd of November 1968, and Sexy Sadie would be the 5th track on side 3 of the album. It was also the 22nd track overall on the White Album. Now Maharishi himself has never really spoken about this song, but in later years when he was asked about his thoughts on the Beatles and if he was angry with them, he simply responded with words to the effect of, "I could never be upset with angels." So that kind of says a lot about his character, doesn't it? So as I mentioned earlier in the video, Lennon did say in later years that he regretted changing the song title from Maharishi to Sexy Sadie. He wished he hadn't been a coward, he wished he'd stuck to his guns and kept the name Maharishi. And I think if he had his time again, this song would probably be called Maharishi, and it would probably have its original lyrics, it's quite explicit lyrics. So Ringo would actually go on to reference Sexy Sadie in one of his solo songs, the song being Devil Woman from 1973's Ringo.
Sexy Sadie, you look like the devil to me.
George Harrison would also go on to reference Sexy Sadie in one of his solo songs, the song being the absolutely brilliant Simply Shady from 1974's Dark Horse album. And in the 90s, Radiohead would also use a piano part during their song Karma Police that was inspired by Sexy Sadie.
This is what you get. This is what you get. This is what you get when you mess with us.
I bloody love this song, and I always have done. I know in my video for I Will I said that was my favourite song on the White Album, but Sexy Sadie is a very close second place. I absolutely love this song. It has always been one of my favourite songs on the White Album. Some days I even say it is my favourite. Like I say, it's a very close second place to I Will. Now I don't really want to get drawn in too much into whether or not Maharishi did sexually assault Maya Farah, but one thing I do think is definitely the case is Magic Alex was a shit stirrer and you couldn't really trust him as far as you could throw him. I think the Beatles did eventually work that out when they were recording the Get Back album, or the Let It Be album as it would become, when they realised his attempt to build them a studio was an absolute failure. But the song Sexy Sadie itself, I think it is absolutely brilliant. I think the backing vocals on this song are brilliant. I think they're some of the best backing vocals on the entire White Album. Paul's piano as well, it is excellent, it's sublime. Yeah, it's one of the highlights of the White Album, the piano on this song. Now, as much as I'd like to have heard a version with John singing the original lyrics with Maharishi named, I actually do think he did the right thing changing it to Sexy Sadie, because it keeps it vague. It kind of means that we can apply it to anyone. I mean, maybe you know a Sexy Sadie, I certainly know a Sexy Sadie, I was involved with a Sexy Sadie last year. But if this song was Maharishi, I couldn't really say that because it would be about a specific person. Whilst yes, it is about a person, this song, it's not actually naming that person, it's sort of giving them a nickname. It's kind of disguising it. I know John did regret doing this, but I think he did the right thing personally, because I think if he had named Maharishi, it could have got him into trouble as well. I don't know if you could be done in court for a character assassination, for defrauding someone's character and stuff like that in the 60s, but in this day and age it'd be pretty hard to get away with a song like this, naming him in the way they did. So this song is also the first time that John Lennon ever did one of these songs where he is attacking someone. He would obviously go on to do them again later, songs like How Do You Sleep. I've forgotten the name of the song off Walls and Bridges, the one that's an attack on Alan Klein. Yeah, my mind's gone blank, sorry about that. But yeah, those songs, they're obviously aimed at people. But I think Sexy Sadie is the best one that he ever did personally. So like I say, brilliant song this. It is one of the best songs on the White Album in my opinion, my second favourite, very close second. So yeah, Sexy Sadie, great song, absolutely love it. So that concludes another episode of the White Album in Depth. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed this and you're not subscribed to my channel, well, please do consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. There is a playlist on my channel which consists of all previous episodes in this series, and all future episodes will also be added to that playlist. So if you want to see any of them, go there. That's the place to find them. Anyway, join me next time when we will be taking a ride down a slide. Till then though, do take care.